Hey all, welcome to week 9. I know that you just took a practical and you just took an exam and you are probably exhausted from that. But as is always the case with anatomy, it just moves on to the next thing. And so hang in there with me. I don't want you to fall behind in the muscular system and the nervous system because those systems are going to require a lot of your attention. They're really interesting systems, and I hope that you find them as fascinating as I do. I just those are some of my favorite systems. I know I say that with every system, but the muscular system and the nervous system are just fascinating, and but they're also complicated, which is part of what makes them so fascinating. So hang in there with me with these two systems. I know that some of you have put in for your muddiest points that you are feeling lost and confused, and so if you're at that point, please set up some time to talk with me. We can Zoom, we can just talk by phone, but make sure that you set up some time if you're one of those individuals that's at that point. Okay, so let's move on to talk about what we're going to do for this week. One, keep in mind that the practicals have to be hand graded. They are being graded this time by Mrs. Gilcrease. So if you have any questions concerning the grading for those, you can email me and then I can pass them on to Mrs. Gilcrease, or you can email her directly, whichever works best for you. Um, and then for the exams, I do have to hand grade those exams as well because there is the one essay question, and then there are a couple questions that asked you to pick, two answers. And if you got one of them correct but didn't get the other one correct, I'll still give you a point back for that. So anyway, hang in there while I get the exams graded. I just am grading them as they come in, but I probably won't have them graded until Tuesday. And again, just like always, we put graded in the comment so that you know that it was graded. Okay. And then I know I'm going to be getting some questions on extra credit. So I will be doing a post on extra credit as well. Let me go ahead and talk about what we're going to do this week so that I don't make this too long. So for the next section of the next exam section of lectures, it's going to again be muscle tissues, the muscular system as a whole, and then we're going to get into nervous tissue. So like always, feel free to print out this review sheet ahead of time. I know that some of you have given me some feedback that have found it very helpful to kind of direct you in your studying as you're going along. This week, we are going to be hitting muscles and muscle tissue. So please make sure that you spend some time with that. It should also help you in terms of understanding a little bit about what the expectations are going to be for lab. And especially next week, we'll get into like origin and insertion and all that. But I'm going to talk about that in just a minute when we get to the lab, because the lab is going to beat you to that before you get it in lecture. So let's talk a little bit about what you're doing this week. Again, make sure you download the PowerPoint. I do have the muscle tissue review questions for you again. So for each section, I put the review questions just for that section. So you can either print the whole review sheet or you can print them week by week in these sections here. And then make sure that you watch the lectures and of course do that muscle tissue quiz. That will close on October 21st at 11:59 p.m. So make sure that you're taking those quizzes. Again, not only do the points help you out, but also it will help you in your preparations for the exams. As for lab this week, let me bump over to lab here. So I know that many of you said the last lab practical was, again, challenging. There are a lot of special features on the bones that you have to know, but you had to know those special features for a reason. And that reason was because we learned them because they're muscle attachment points. So it's going to be vastly important for you to know those features for the fact that there are going to be muscles that are attaching to them. So let's get into practical 3 and what you're going to need to do. So for this week, we are going to be doing the muscles of the head, neck, and torso. So you can open this document here. And if you can print these documents or if you want to download them onto your computer so that way then you can reference them and study from them, these again are going to be your kind of lab, basically your lab book for what you need to know for this next lab practical. So the next lab practical is just all muscles. That's it. The lab practical is muscles. That's enough. And it's because you're going to need to know, be able to identify the muscle, which is kind of the first thing that you need to be able to do is to identify where these muscles are. But then you're going to need to identify the origin of the muscle, the insertion of the muscle, and the actions of the muscle. So the origin is going to be the bone or feature of a bone that's stationary. That bone is not going to be moving. And the insertion will be the portion that's going to actually be moving and doing the action. This one's kind of a goofy one because the insertion encircles the orbit inserting on itself. But let's do one that makes up maybe a little more sense here. So let's talk about the masseter. So the masseter muscle here, you can see it's got these two origins where it's going to originate on the zygomatic bone and the zygomatic arch, okay, up here. And then the insertion, so that's going to be the stationary part. When the muscle contracts, that feature, that bone is not going to move. However, the insertion point will be the bone that does move when that muscle contracts. And so the insertion is the ramus of the mandible, which you can see here, okay? So where it inserts on that mandible, you can now picture if that muscle contracts, as it contracts, it's going to elevate the mandible, okay? Now you can see also based on the direction that it's going, it's also going to protrude the mandible, okay? So those are going to be the actions of those muscles. Again, make sure that you know at least one action for each of the muscles. Now, the big trick with this, and the reason that I'm bringing up the origin and insertion, even though we're going to go over it in lecture, I want you to know what it is here because you need to know those origin insertions. One, not only because on the practical, they could ask you, what is an origin? What is an insertion? Or what is an action? Those, again, are the 3 questions that we'll ask. But if you know the origin and if you know the insertion, you can figure out the action. So you don't have to memorize. So again, for example, with the masseter, if you know that the origin is going to be on that zygomatic bone, that zygomatic arch here, and then the insertion is going to be the ramus of the mandible. And as it contracts, you know the insertion point is the one that's going to move. As it contracts and shrinks up, right? You know that it's going to pull that mandible up. So elevates the mandible is a really easy action and you don't even have to memorize it. As long as you know that origin and insertion, okay? So that is kind of the trick. Now you're going to see the model keys are kind of more for if you're in the in-person lab, but we do have these like torso models, and then the mini man model you'll see is an entire person. He's kind of got one arm up like this, and they're kind of a smaller model, so we call that the mini man. So you'll see some of these muscles on these different models, and I'll show you kind of where you can get to these models here in just a minute. So basically, again, that's what we're going to be doing for the section. And so, but don't leave this for the end. You need to be doing these week by week because, again, just like the bones, this information is way too much to put off. So you need to start on it this week. You can't leave that for later. And you can see again, the origins and insertions are the hardest part for most students, remembering those origin insertions. But like I said, if you can know the origin and insertion, then the action just comes easily. Okay. So you shouldn't have to memorize all those actions. This is also why I posted the video on angular movements, because these actions that we have, we're going to use those angular movement terms like flexion, extension, abduction, like abduction, adduction, addduction, okay? Rotating laterally, rotating medially. So it's going to be really important that you, if you haven't already, watch that video on those actions that we talked about in the joint section so that you're familiar with them, you're ready for them, so that way then you can jump right into this lab. You can see here also that you need to be really careful with, and I talked about this in that video, but with what is going to be extended or abducted. And so you need to make sure, especially with flexion and extension, that when you are talking about extension of the arm, okay, remember, extension of the arm is going to be, and you can even put upper arm, okay, is going to be the upper arm here. So extension of that, in this case here, I'm looking at the latissimus dorsi. Extension is going to be pulling that arm back. Okay, or I should say that's actually hyperextension. So technically moving that arm back to anatomical position. So flexion, let me see if I can kind of do this. Let me see if I can get a better image here and put myself off to the side. So I don't have much, I know, on my video here, but again, if you have your arm out here, so this would be flexion of the arm, okay? And then extension of the arm would be bringing it back to anatomical position. So when you extend your arm back to anatomical position, again, the latissimus dorsi is partially doing that. Adduction of the arm, again, would be this way, okay? Adding it back in. But I wanted to make sure that you remembered that that's the arm. The arm refers to the upper arm, okay? If you're going to do flexion here at the elbow, okay, flexion here is going to be of the forearm. So make sure that you differentiate that, because if you say, you know, a muscle is doing, if you say the, you know, latissimus dorsi is doing flexion of the forearm, then you would be incorrect because it's doing flexion of, or I'm sorry, extension of the arm, okay? And so be really careful with that, especially it's more really honestly for when you get to the forearm, because what happens is students will make that mistake of saying flexion of the arm and they meant flexion of the forearm. And again, those are two different movements. So this is flexion of the forearm, and then this is flexion of the arm or upper arm, okay? Same thing with the leg. Make sure that you differentiate between flexion of the thigh and flexion of the lower leg, okay? So those are terms that you just want to make sure that you're using and that you're using them, you know, properly, because I will tell you that's usually a hang up for a lot of students on this. And so hopefully we can catch it early, and that way then you don't make those same mistakes. But this is, again, a tougher practical in terms of memorizing the origin and insertions. So start this early, and I want to make sure, but it's also a fun one because a lot of people like and enjoy learning about the muscles of the human body. So again, you've got all of these resources here, just like before. So there are, so here you can watch, there's short videos on the anatomical actions for the muscle lab. So you can watch this video. I think this one may actually be one that I had put together, and I ended up putting the short one together for you. Um, I'm just going to check this really quickly. Sorry. I know. I'm sorry that all the YouTube things have the ads. I wish we did. I wish we could avoid those and more ads. Sorry. Sorry, guys. Let's skip those. Oh, I did post this video. So this might be a little bit of a better video. I didn't remember where I put this video when someone had asked for it, but there is an anatomical actions video. It's the same one that I just did for you guys and posted as an announcement, but it's an older one. So you're welcome to check that one out and see if it helps you anymore. But it's pretty much the same thing that I just posted. Then again, this just reminds you that you need to be able to, if a muscle has two origins, you should know at least two of those origins. If a muscle has two insertions, then you should know at least two of those insertions. And then again, if for the muscles that have different actions, usually we're going to ask for one action, but if it's a special muscle that has a couple different actions, and I'll try to gear you towards those as those muscles come up, something like the sartorius, then we'll gear you towards knowing more than one action. But most of the muscles, we're just going to ask for one action. And then there are these great labeling exercises that are from the models. So you can download it and print these. I know some of you really like those, and then you could fill them in if you want to. Again, so one of your classmates suggested you could put it in a clear sleeve, and then you can actually, use their dry erase markers so you can, do this multiple times. And then there are some great videos by Dr. Pam Harrison. And so you can go through and listen to these videos as she kind of goes through some of these muscles. So like here in this video, she's going to go through the muscles, the head and the neck. And she's actually really good about being brief, which I'm not always so good at. So I think you'll really enjoy those videos. And thankfully, we all kind of share resources. She put together a great set of videos for these classes. And then we also have our tutor put together additional videos if you'd like to look at those. Then we do have the 3D models. So we have that. These are, again, these Sketchfab models that are three-dimensional, and you can move them around and rotate them. So here's our half head. I'll just kind of show you our half head model. So make sure that you use these when you can, because it's really nice to be able to actually manipulate them. This is kind of as close as you can get, right, to manipulating some of these. So, and you can open these obviously outside here of, you don't have to open them right in Canvas, so that you can kind of see some more of these models. But it's really nice because, again, you can get to know the kind of three-dimensional, you can see things in 3 dimensions, like as if you had that model right in front of you. So that's kind of as close as we can get virtually. And then again, there are lots of StudyMate flashcards. So there's some even StudyMate flashcards on muscle terminology. So please, please, please use those. We have lots and lots of StudyMate flashcards, and you can see, again, flashcard after flashcard after flashcard here. So please use those. If you want, you can look at some cadaver videos as well. I think it's always interesting for you to be able to see, because if we had you in the in-person lab, every once in a while we bring out our cadavers and show you some of these, anatomical features on the actual cadaver. And then, of course, I have practice quizzes. I put dates to help keep you on track. So again, These due dates are not, you're not given a grade for these practice quizzes, but please keep in mind that if you end up being a borderline grade at the end of the semester, I can go back and see if you have done your practice quizzes. And that kind of helps give me that edge, up if you were like a 79, point 4, and I'm like, oh, you're so close. If you've done all those practice quizzes, that gives me that little edge to bump you up. Okay, so make sure that you do those practice quizzes. Again, there's benefits for doing them, not just for bumping your grade up, but obviously for getting you ready for the practical and keeping you on track. And then I have practice practicals here. So a lot of practice over and over. Again, same thing as last time. Repetition, repetition, repetition is how you get this information down. So take your time with this material. Again, start early. And if you need to and you're really struggling with some of these muscles, get into a study lab. Okay, getting into a study lab either at the Red Mountain campus or Southern and Dobson, getting your hands on the actual models and actually, touching the muscles and pointing them out really helps you out if you're struggling with seeing these online. Okay, so I think that is all I had for this week. I know that's plenty. Again, there's lots of resources here, and you pick, hopefully by now you kind of have an idea of what resources work best for you. So you don't have to use all of these resources. Pick the ones that work best for you. But like I said, start early, repetition, repetition, repetition. And, this is a great time that if you haven't already kind of met some people in the class and found some, study partners, it's really great to be able to have someone you can even meet virtually and like point things out to each other. So make sure that, or, if you even have a spouse or something that wouldn't mind like quizzing you, the more you can get in terms of going over this material in a manner that prepares you for the practical, the better. So, and as always, I'm here for you. If you need some help, please reach out to me, contact me. I will set up a Zoom, Google Meet, whatever you need. Or we can even set up a phone call if you don't want to, schedule a Google Meet or a chat. But please reach out to me if you're struggling and get some help early on. The earlier, the better with the muscles. Okay. But again, they're a lot of fun. I don't want to scare you off too much with the muscles because, again, the muscles are interesting. They're fascinating. And honestly, it's some of the most beneficial information that you can come out of here with because, if you pull a muscle or, you've got a muscle that's really tight or something like that, at least where that muscle runs, its origin, insertion, and action, and it really can help you identify which muscle is the problem muscle. So sometimes really, really useful information for you in your day-to-day life. All right. So again, if you have any questions, reach out to me and I will be talking to you shortly, hopefully.